I bet if you're like me, you've had those thoughts that if you could just go back and rewind time, you could change the past. Just imagine bringing your knowledge that you have now into the past, the different directions that you would take with your life, and where would that lead you today? Now, I'm not talking about the obvious. I mean, if I could go back a year, then you can be sure that I would remember all of the fights, all of the sports, all of the things that you could win money on bets, and I would change my life in that way. Maybe I'd look at Bitcoin and invest when it gets low, all that stuff. I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about things that you could change in the way that you behave, in the choices that you make. For me, because I love martial arts, I would go back and I would train in certain styles. I would give it much more attention and I would train much earlier. I would read so many more books when I was much younger, so I would have an even wider foundation to stand upon. I'd look at my priorities and make sure that they're my priorities and not the ones that society wants me to have. And I'm sure that you can list a whole heap of things that would be so amazing if you changed it in your past. So what's this all about? It's a daydream. At best, it might make you feel a bit interesting, but at worst, it's regret. It's a lot of lost opportunity. So why are we discussing this in the first place? Well, the reason why is because all of this stuff is really a cop-out, an excuse, a cope. So what actually happens in reality, people talk about their past and they realize that they made mistakes, that they didn't take advantage of certain opportunities. And then along come the stories about how hard they had it, how they didn't have opportunities, and how difficult things were when they were someone else's age. And you've met these people. I meet them every single day. People just tell me how lucky I am, how they've come from this country that's just terrible and they've had no opportunities. And most of the time it's a Western country that's financially well off. Maybe people are talking about a time in the past, about how hard things were. And sure, objectively, there was no air conditioning, there were problems, but there was also a lot of good things. For example, the new generation has to deal with COVID, and we're talking about restrictions that no living generation in the West has ever had to deal with. So my point isn't to say how hard things are now. My point isn't to say how hard things were in the past. Everyone's had a cross to carry. Everyone's had a burden. But the fact is that as soon as you use that as an excuse, it's basically all over. So back to the question about thinking about the past and what you could change. I want you to think right now, what's your age? How old are you right now as you listen to this recording? Now, whatever number your age is, just add 10 to it. And now imagine you're that age. At that age, look at where you are right now. Now we have real perspective. Now, instead of making up a story, making up an excuse, daydreaming about how things could have been better, you're actually responsible for what happens. So the next question is, at that age, 10 years in the future, what would you like to be like? You can think about it from where you are right now or where you are 10 years in the future, just projecting yourself 10 years in the future and looking back. I like to do both. First is looking with goals, but secondly is looking backwards, because if you see yourself as being 10 years older, when you look back, not only do you see if all the trouble was worth it to achieve the goals, but you can also see, hey, there is a fair amount of work in order to get the really big goals that most people want. And from these two vantage points, you can work out, is the juice really worth the squeeze? The other good thing about looking backwards to where you are right now is it takes on a new multi-layered dimension, because it's easy to say, yes, I love this sport. I'm really passionate about it. I'm going to do everything I can so in 10 years, I'm the world champion at that. But it's not until you look backwards and realize that, hey, maybe you did become a world champion, but is that everything? Do you really want to be a world champion at the cost of not having a family? Maybe you do. That's fine. But it's just that perspective that really gives clarity to it. So you get the point. Instead of looking back at your past and wishing you could have done things earlier, that you could have tried harder, that you could have done focus on certain things that would really enhance your life to where you are right now, just reverse engineer. Put yourself in the future. Put yourself in that place where you think, I would love in 10 years to achieve this. And then imagine your 10 years in the future. Imagine that you've achieved it and that it was satisfying. Or if it's not, maybe you have to reevaluate your goals. And from the future, look back at the past up to where you are right now. And from that position, look at all the work that's involved to get there. Now, don't look at the work as being something onerous, but just see it for what it is and say, is it really worth it? Am I going to have to train 4 or 5 hours a day in order to become that generic world champion? Will that cost me in my relationships, or can I work it out in other ways? Maybe I can get up an hour earlier every day and write a couple of pages and finally become an author. Maybe I could put together a podcast for myself. Maybe I could do this new hobby, this new sport. Maybe I could get married, have kids. It's up to you, but look at it from a multifaceted angle. Now, when you've done that, I want to ask you a question. What's easier, looking back at the past and trying to make up stories about how you could have made it better, or taking responsibility for now and the future? And honestly, we know the answer. It's really difficult to take ownership and responsibility for right now because there's a multitude of factors. So next time you're thinking about how you wish the past was different, or you've got an excuse for the way things have turned out, unfortunately, you no longer have that. And this is a double-edged sword because you've lost that excuse. You've lost that way out. But on the flip side, you've got that responsibility. And with that responsibility comes amazing potential to do almost anything. But that responsibility means that if you do fail, if you don't take advantage of the potential that's within you, that the opportunities that are around you, if you do not take advantage of all of those things, then you're responsible for failing as well. And in my experience, this is where most people come unstuck. So stop looking at the past, start looking at the future. And when you do so, look with intention. Don't listen to the gurus who tell you to be an entrepreneur just because it's the cool thing, or to take up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu just because everybody does it. Make sure you do what you want to do. I know a lot of people who have been living other people's dreams. I know so many guys who have taken up BJJ, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they did it because all the cool guys were doing it. And then years later, they've got so many injuries from it, they've pulled out, they didn't really like it to begin with, and a lot of those guys, they're actually not married anymore because they would spend 5 nights a week on the mats. Now, if you're passionate about it, I'm not putting it down. But the fact is that people are lost today, so we look for answers around. We see what the next guy is doing. We try to understand, hey, is this something that's going to be interesting to me? And then we take it on board as if it's our own wish. But we have to really step back, take a breath, and look at things and see if it's what you really want. Same thing for the laptop lifestyle. Those people who promote it's just the best thing ever. They often don't mention that there's so much grind in it and that it takes 10, 12 hours a day for months, years to really lift off. And even if you do everything right, there is a fair proportion of those people who don't actually make it or get short-term results at first or get cancelled or whatever it is. And then when you lift the hood off the public image of them, they're on Facebook doing marketing, they're doing comments and likes and views and their marketing plans. And it's something that's probably a little more boring than a 9-to-5 job in many cases. Again, I'm not knocking this. If this is what you're passionate about, so be it. But go into things with your eyes open. Make sure it's something that you want to do. Because the fact is that we're just indoctrinated with these celebrity influencers who tell us you have to be doing this sport, you have to be doing this sort of fitness regime, you have to be living this lifestyle, you have to be an entrepreneur, you have to be doing this and that. The easy way to see if it's really for you is to fast forward those 5 or 10 years in the future. Think about how amazing it would be. Let's say if we use those 2 examples that I just mentioned. So you're suddenly a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in 10 years' time. And at the same time, you've also been living the laptop lifestyle where you've been an entrepreneur, you've got your own brand, whatever it is. Now, think about 2 things. One is the easy bit, how good that would feel. Now, obviously, it would feel amazing. And number 2 is to look at what the cost would be. Is it really going to be worth it when it means for the next 10 years, your evenings are going to be on those jiu-jitsu mats? If you love it and you've got nothing else going, do it. Does it mean that sitting at your laptop and doing hours and hours of marketing every day and doing these meetings with other people, sometimes people you don't want to meet with, spending money, not sure that you're going to get anything back, is that something that's you're willing to sacrifice in order to achieve that goal of being successful in that pursuit? This future version of yourself will definitely tell you the right answer. So trust in yourself. Look at your future. Don't look at your past, and you will see what direction you need to go. I hope this has been useful, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Hope you enjoyed the podcast. If so, rate it from the place you downloaded it. For any questions, send an email to michaelpulser@gmail.com.